Loss, bereavement and grief. What do they mean? That course explores the nature of grief, how it's experienced, the different forms it can take, and beliefs and attitudes regarding what's normal or healthy grief. It also considers social and cultural attitudes to death and grief, as well as major theories of grief, which attempt to describe and explain why grief occurs and what its purpose is. One major limitation of theories is that they involve generalizations, that is, they meant to apply to everyone equally. But it soon became evident to me when working with bereaved people that everyone's grief is unique to them. Generalizations may provide a framework, but real people don't fit neatly into theoretical boxes and patterns. From my own experience of losing people close to me, I would suggest that part of the uniqueness of everyone's grief is that we never know how another's death will affect us until it happens. What certain theories predict will be our likely reaction, and the reality of that reaction, are often worlds apart. It may not be until a person's death dies that we begin to appreciate the true nature of our relationship with him or her. We might grieve for the relationship we thought we had, or the one we wished we had, rather than the one we actually had. Just as relationships are complex, so can be grief. In this and the following 6 chapters, I try to sample both personal experiences and theoretical accounts of grief. They are both valid in their different ways. But I think that before you begin reading, you should accept the guiding principle that there's no single correct way to grieve, which includes not being able to put a time limit on the grieving process. Sometimes, grief may continue for a lifetime, because we continue to love the person we have lost. While death and taxes have famously been cited as the only certainties in life, we could add grief to that list. The link between death and grief is love, sometimes attachment. We grieve for those we loved who have died. I am sorry for your loss has become a familiar and an almost cliched acknowledgement in Western countries, especially the US and UK, of the death of someone who was emotionally significant to the person being addressed. If we lost bereavement grief, what do they mean? Excerpted from the Psychology of Grief chapter 767. Try to unpack the statement. We identify a number of key terms and assumptions that recur throughout this book. You might like to have a go at doing this yourself. I recognize that X has died, is deceased, and I know that he was an important person in your life. Bereavement is probably the most difficult experience that any of us has to go through in our lives, and you will inevitably go through a process of grieving for X. This is going to be tough, but it's a necessary part of your attempt to come to terms with X's death in order to be able to move on with your life. So, what has this unpacking revealed? Bereavement refers to the loss, through death, of someone to whom we were very close emotionally attached, or who, in some other way, played an important part in our lives, loved one, or significant other. Grief refers to the way we respond to bereavement. As we shall see, it can take many different forms, but we assume that, in some form or another, grief is inevitable. Grief is commonly Ned as a universal reaction to bereavement, i.e. observed in all cultures and throughout human history, involving bodily, physical, emotional, cognitive, and spiritual experiences and expressed in a wide range of observable behaviors. These experiences and behaviors are described in detail in Chapter 2. Not only is grief inevitable, but we need to grieve. This is our way, nature's way, of helping us come to terms and accept that our loved one has died. Together, the inevitability and necessity of grief point to the concept of grief work, i.e. the process by which we detach ourselves emotionally from the deceased in order to form new attachments, relationships and get on with the rest of our lives. Primary and secondaryloss in the above? Unpacking? Example. Loss. is being used metaphorically, i.e. in a non-literal way. When someone dies, we haven't lost them in the way we may lose, usually, more accurately, mislay our keys or mobile phone. In fact, we don't usually play any part, active or passive, in their death. Using loss for death is not just metaphorical but also euphemistic. While dead is forever, lost at least implies the possibility of being found. In other words, loss is much softer, much kinder than death, a gentler, more caring way of acknowledging what actually happened. Loss, Bereavementand, grief. What do they mean? Excerpted from the Psychology of Grief, Chapter 768. The loss in I am sorry for your loss is also primary. It refers to who has died and involves both a physical loss, the deceased person is no longer physically, literally, there, and a relational loss, the breaking of the relationship or attachment, emotional tie, with that person. Importantly, this display of sympathy makes no acknowledgement, even unconsciously, implicitly, of the, often multiple, secondary losses brought about by the primary loss. These refer to what has been lost, the consequences or fallout of the loved one's death. For example, losing a husband or wife instantly deprives you of the status of married person. You become a widow, widower, a new, undesirable identity by which society nes you. Less explicitly, and of Ciali is the changed identity that comes with the death of your second parent. Many older adults bereaved in this way describe themselves as having become an orphan. The effects of the death of different relatives, or kinship, are discussed in Chapter 5.